And now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, I hope you've brought your hard hats because it's about to get your mind blown when we talk some shh, 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 IT with Glenn and Tony. Take it away, boys.
Thank you, Angie.
I think she
Always.
blew my mind right there with those.
She shushed it right out of your brain, right?
You know, I feel like my mind was just.
Indeed. Now, we had a few things that we wanted to go over tonight. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're all here tonight. And we were going to talk about some guitar intonation things. I think we might do that. Might even have a special guest here with us this evening to talk about intonation. And we'll see what that is as we get to it. Question is, do we want to get started with that first, or do we want to do some other things in the meantime? What do you think, Tone?
Well, we were getting Johnny's or Donnie's guitar hooked up to the computer, so we can hear a signal.
Nice.
If you want to quickly get that going, Donnie. I'd like to hear your guitar.
Nice.
You hear that?
Let's see.
Not yet.
Really?
Could still be that noise canceling eating it up. We'll have to take a look at that as well.
Yeah, we adjusted his Zoom noise canceling, but if you want to double check that, Donnie, if you want to bring up the audio settings, share your screen again like we did earlier, and we'll just quickly double check it. That way Glenn can verify.
Mm-hmm.
And these are common settings, you know, with Zoom to get audio in. This is an important procedure for everybody who wants to play an instrument in this room.
Absolutely. Got to make sure everybody can get in there. Got to make sure the noise canceling isn't eating up the other signals. All that good stuff.
Yeah, and the Zoom settings can seem a little confusing sometimes, but most of the ones that need to get adjusted are pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we are going straight from his Katana into Zoom.
Okay. And we do see that the suppressed background noise is set to low, which is correct. That's where we would want it to be. If you do have a lot of noise going on in the background, you'd want to bring it to medium or high. Usually we don't want to set it on auto. If it's set for auto or medium or high is when it'll sit there and eat the guitar essentially when you're trying to play, because it takes it as noise as opposed to being the signal that it's trying to work around.
And we also uncheck the box automatically adjust microphone volume, because
Right, exactly.
Zoom by default has that box checked.
Yeah.
Horrible setting. I don't like Zoom auto changing volume.
I do like also the music and professional audio settings, having these available down here. We don't necessarily want to activate them all, but this makes sure that the options are available. So that's good. And other
Yeah,
than that,
for anybody who's going to play an instrument into Zoom, those professional audio settings are kind of essential.
Mm-hmm. But the main thing is right now with the background noise cancellation set to low, then we should be able to get clear signal from the instrument being played, particularly if there's no other noise going on. So let's see if we can get that going. If we still don't hear anything, then we need to look at the output send from what you're sending from the Katana, potentially.
Yeah, make sure that the Katana is actually sending a signal.
Yeah,
And the other thing,
out of that.
the other thing I had him do was go to the advanced, because under the advanced audio settings, there is one thing that is important for musicians. So if you can bring up the advanced audio settings for a second.
I've got to stop share.
Yeah, and that's another good thing to know. You have to bring up the audio settings before you share the screen, because once you're sharing the screen, there's no settings button.
Right. There we go.
Zoom can be a little confusing when you're sharing the screen because that bar just throws people off.
Yeah, there's that signal processing by Windows audio device drivers. That would be the setting he's looking for there.
Yeah. So the reason why I like to do this, and basically it's Windows Raw, is what it's called. This is pure signal. Windows does its own, sound manipulation on audio devices. So if you do use the Windows default or the auto, you could be doing noise compression and things in Windows. And the same goes with Mac. Operating systems will add their own noise cancellation and things sometimes. So if you really want to know that your signal is pure coming into Zoom, you want to switch to that, to the raw one. And that's the
way, yep.
yeah, that's the only other important thing to adjust in Zoom. By default, it's set to auto.
So raw.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Raw.
And that should be what it's set for already. But that's
So
Yeah,
now,
it's
if you jump back, if you go back, hit the back. If you are sending a signal from your guitar, we should see it in the microphone. Your microphone should be showing levels right now. They're not. So you're muted in Zoom, which might be why we're not seeing levels. So unmute on your computer, which you might have to stop sharing to do.
Yeah, or at least get to that bar at the top.
There we go. So now you're unmuted. We should get a signal from your Katana at this point. And if you're looking at your audio settings, you should actually see levels where the mic is, which is a good indicator that it's picking something up.
For whichever track it is, I would want to have it record enabled so that it's ready to receive that signal.
Well, and we're not using the Katana right now in Cakewalk, so I would actually minimize Cakewalk and just get it out of the way, because
or even close it to prevent.
Closing it is actually what I would recommend, just so that there's no potential obstacles. I mean, fortunately, his Cakewalk is using the Focusrite, so the good thing is we're not stepping on audio devices right now, because Zoom is using the Katana, Cakewalk is using Focusrite, and
I'm so glad my background here is appropriate.
Yeah, it's a good one.
it's a nice background. So if you can get the Zoom settings back up so we can see the microphone and see that level. And then we'll focus on the Katana and make sure that like the master output of the Katana is up. Because there's the input level, if you look above the volume there for the microphone, that input level, that's a meter. So you're not technically getting any signal in on that microphone right now, because there's
one thing you could do is right there where it says primary katana under the microphone.
Oh yeah, there's a secondary
you can
too.
Change that. This one would be for the speakers, but the one
Well, yeah,
is for the microphone.
you're changing your speakers right now. Change the microphone, because we want to get a signal coming in. So
there you go.
It's all about the microphone here.
So if you find the one that would be whatever we're using to actually talk.
Yeah. Now try hitting the guitar.
It's still set for secondary katana. I wanted to set that one for what are the other options on that list? Because that'll show us what your other audio cards or audio devices coming in are.
Yeah, you should see the Focusrite at this point.
On that drop down, yeah. Yep, there you go.
Yeah, analog 1, 2. Try that, and let's see if your Focusrite is routing the Katana. Try hitting something.
And that's the question: is would the Focusrite be picking up what you're using through your microphone, or is that for your guitar setup?
He's running the guitar into the Focusrite.
Okay.
No, actually, I got the input into the guitar through the Katana.
The other thing is that the speaker that it's trying to use is going out the Katana. Is that what we wanted there, or should that be going to the system?
Yeah, because it's running from the Katana So I'm bypassing the focus, right?
Now, can you hear the katana in your headphones?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Okay, so you know that the katana is doing something.
Oh yeah.
You can hear it. So that's the question: is why this microphone is not picking up what the katana's.
Putting down.
Yep. And that's where, again, going through the different options here for microphone to see that we get any kind of input at all. That'll tell us whether or not we have anything coming in. So, for example, going to the whether it's the stereo mix or whether it's the same as system or whether it's the one that mentions the focus, right? Like using each of the other ones just to see if any of them get us any input level. Because as of right now, we're not seeing any input from anything.
Try going through each one, hit like a chord or a string, and see if a signal comes through.
Okay.
The other thing that we could do is go through the intonation portion, looking at the guitar itself, and then when it comes to the actual listening to it, we could do that after the break. That's another way we can go about it and give us some time to look at it in the meantime.
Yeah, we'll have like an hour and a half to play more with this after.
When it comes to the different guitar styles that you build, how do you decide on a body style? Is it like, do you have a favorite style, or is it more based on a sound that you need to fulfill, that you need a certain sound for or a certain guitar shape for?
Well, it's all preference as far as shape and the sound. Really, what's comfortable for the shape and the sound. The thicker, the denser, you know, is going to sound different if it's hollow or semi-hollow. Uh, this one that I built put a little bit of hollowness into it, a few voided spots, which definitely gives it a different sound.
And actually, we don't have your camera up right now. We have the shared screens, but we could get the share screen down and bring the camera up so we can see the guitar if you want.
I'm running through my phone and then using the computer also. I don't have a camera on my.
Use the one on your phone.
Yeah,
the way you
use
were
the one on the phone if you need to.
Yeah, the way you were last night. Now, when it comes to adjusting intonation on a guitar, why do guitars have to adjust their intonation?
Due to the relief in the neck. If the neck gets out of position, like whether it's too far up or whether it's too far back, it can cause issues where you get fret buzz if it's too far back. It feels like the action is too high if it's too far up. Plus, the intonation wouldn't be right. Or if you're hitting an open string, an E, and that's perfectly in tune, then you should also be able to get a perfectly in tune E at the 12th fret on that same string. But if that's not,
and is that
right,
is that something that can progressively change, and that's why you had to adjust yours on your bass, because over time?
Whether it's over time, sometimes it's humidity or heat or the conditions where you are. In my apartment, my heat kind of pumps, so it's not ideal for the instruments, where sometimes the heat is on high and the air conditioner is fighting against it. So it could be a dry but hot kind of a situation.
Yeah,
different temperatures are affected.
Window here in the room just for a few hours. They'll soak it all in, and you got to go adjust them. Yeah, they're pretty.
So how often would you say you'd have to adjust the intonation, just in general, like once a year?
Oh, more frequent than that.
More?
It's something that I check almost every time I play. Just
Really?
And it doesn't really move that far from one session to the next if you're playing pretty regularly. But at the same time, it's one of those things where if it is just a little bit out, it can really mess up your ears. It sounds like you're out of tune, and then you tune up, and then it still sounds like you're out of tune.
Yeah, because the intonation, your fretboard repeats at fret 12. I don't know if everybody knows that, but this is the octave is fret 12. So for beginner guitar players, you look at the fretboard and 6 strings and 22 or 24 frets, and it's like, oh my goodness, But really, if you're in standard E, your top string and your bottom string, both these, they're the same string, they're the same note. So take two of those out of the mix, that brings down to four. Because whatever this one does, this one's going to be the same note. So take that down to where it's just four strings, and then stop it here at the 12th because it's going to repeat. Whatever you do down here, you just transpose up to here. So now you go to right here in four strings. It looks a whole lot more condensed and smaller. So it's, when you're looking at the whole thing, it can be overwhelming. But if you kind of adopt that mindset or that principle, it really makes it a whole
It
lot
feels
easier.
more manageable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Similarly, when with keyboard, people look at a keyboard, they see 88 keys, and it's like, oh my God, there's so many of them. But it is the same thing, where it's just 12 tones that repeat over and over again. So once you kind of focus in on, it doesn't matter which octave, but you focus in on an octave where you're just dealing with those 12 notes, and you can deal with all the different aspects of harmony and all that stuff, where you can expand outside of that octave, but realizing that it's just duplicating over there. You don't have to memorize, note 13 and note 75 of the 88 keys. You just have to know that, this one's a C and that one's a G or what have you.
Yeah.
It's the other buttons that are more intimidating on my keyboard. The keys don't freak me out, but all these other buttons do.
Mm-hmm. Now the truss rods that you're using in those guitars, that's different than the ones that we usually see, where again, most of the instruments I've had, the truss rod adjustment is done at the headstock, and these look like they're the opposite, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, these are, and this one first, no. I was first introduced to these on the Schecter SLS Elite, and I was like, "What in the world is this?" And
So
it's,
this is a new approach with these
I
truss
think
rods?
I think it's fairly might have been around for, I don't honestly, I can't say how long. I haven't done the investigation on that. I know it's a game changer. Once you have a spoke wheel truss rod, for me personally, I mean, there's no going back, because you're trying to fit an Allen key into the top of the guitar in the headstock and mess with it that way versus using just anything. You can use just a drill bit just to fit in.
Nice.
And then you just adjust it. Should have a little more. Fit in there. You just turn it. Moves real fluid. So you can control the back bow or the bow depending on the tension of the strings. If you need to, if it's too tight or if your strings are pulling up the neck, then you can tighten it, which will make the truss rod kind of frown. It'll push the neck back down, or you can control it to come back up, however you need to.
And if you do bring it too far back down, that's when you'll start introducing fret buzz. That would be the indicator usually when you're playing fretted notes higher up on the neck. You'll start to hear the buzzing of the frets because the string is slapping against them.
Yeah, because it's gonna kind of do this number if it's too tight. Your middle's gonna be raised up. These are super handy. Even if you're not building guitars, this is probably something that you'd want to pick up. I know if I wasn't building guitars, I would still want to have one of these after using it, because you can, it's a fret, say a ruler, but a straight edge for your fretboard. It has two different sides on it for the scale lengths. You just fit it here at the first fret, and then it will lay across the fretboard. And if you see any light coming in, it will, show you that you're gapped.
Now, what do they call those?
I think it's just a fretboard straight edge. Wouldn't call it a fretboard ruler because it doesn't really measure anything.
But it is a tool designed specifically for guitar building.
Even
Yeah.
just guitar maintenance, like he was saying, if the neck was bent too far back, like you would see light coming in from the edges on that straight edge, and if it was bent, bowed in the middle, you would be seeing the edges would be on, touching, and the middle would be showing a lot of light through.
Yeah, if you need to tighten it, yeah, you'll see light in the middle because you'd be smiling basically, it'd be like a U, and if it's too tight, it'd be frowning or like a rainbow, and this would be teetering. It'd be bouncing free to. Oh shoot!
And
I
that
didn't.
would be useful even for somebody who doesn't build guitars, you're saying?
Oh yeah, because it's
Just for maintenance?
Yeah, here I can demonstrate. I'm sorry. I know I'm gonna do this. I'm so sorry. Don't get
You got to talk nice to them.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
And the idea again is that usually these kinds of adjustments are the things that either go in or go out like slowly over time. So like if you fixed it today and you looked at it tomorrow, it's fine. You look at it next week, it's fine. But a couple weeks later, maybe you're starting to see it drift. But it really depends. It could stay perfect the whole time also. So that's one of those things where it's good just to check, just to make sure that there weren't recent changes in temperature or humidity or whatever that caused
And
it.
Does
you know, it's
playing it
gonna.
kind of instigate it too, or is it more the temperature does it drastically and playing really doesn't affect it?
I think it depends how you play. Like if you're doing serious bends and things like that, that might affect it. But if you're just
If you're like a
playing,
James?
I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, it's just you can pick up the guitar, and I know I can anyways, and put my hands on it and almost not even get out any strum, but I can just when I grab it and you feel it, you're like, something's off here. Especially the action. If I grab it here in the middle and I can feel that the strings are almost touching, the fretboard, they're really, really, really close. I know something's going to be wrong, or if I grab it and they're far away and it takes more to depress, then I know that there's a large gap in there and it's probably too loose and needs tightened up. Um, it can just, you can go to town banging on it, playing real heavy. I'm a heavy-handed strummer, so for me, I just check them every single time. It's hard to say actually on an average. Um, Sometimes it seems more than I actually want to be adjusting, uh, but it could just be the humidity and stuff. Um,
Do you have a specific height over each fret that you try to aim for the action, or is it more of a feel and a look when you're eyeing down the neck?
well, industry says you want um, a little bow, and
Relief. Yeah.
I'm like no, I don't want relief. I want a flat uh, fretboard. I don't want to be playing down low or up high, low register.
Why does the industry suggest the, the bow like that?
I don't know. I know I know that the back bow, like right now, I don't know if you can hear this, but I tightened the truss rod and it's
You can hear it clicking on the ends a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely
It's a
teeter.
rocker.
Yeah, and so that's really bad on the neck is to have that.
The frowny.
Yeah, the frowning face. It's really bad on the. That's why I was like, I'm sorry.
Now we're gonna
So
make
yeah,
it just
tighten or
it's also small adjustments. It's not like, crank it 15 times and then check it. It's like you move it a little and you see how it is and you move it a little. And also even giving it time to settle in is another one of those things that's kind of annoying about truss rod adjustments is like you make a little adjustment, looks perfect, you set it aside, and it turns out that you adjusted it too much, but it hadn't settled in all the way yet.
Oh, so it does have to kind of wind back a little, or
Kind of get comfy with itself. Like you're making an adjustment inside, and then that all has to translate throughout the rest of the body and through everything.
yeah, and it'll you kind of adjust it and get a few strums on the strings just to get the vibrations going, and it'll kind of help work itself, and then check it again. And they have string action rulers that you can check at the 12th fret. And really the truss rod isn't for adjusting the action. That's more the nut up at the right here, your nut and your saddle.
Mhm.
Really is for the action. Because if your nut height is too high, you could be playing a C, all your good cowboy chords, especially your A minors or your um, E majors and your F. You're going to be pressing down. You're going to be pressing down so far that it actually takes,
Detunes a little bit.
yeah, detunes it, yeah.
Mhm.
Which I don't know how many people know that. I just was kind of, I started playing again after 17 years last May, and so I didn't know any of the music theory stuff. The maintenance, the truss rod was always kind of something where you take to a shop and get done. Um, I think it's just for me, and I really would recommend other players to learn that stuff because it really makes you bond with the instrument more, and
Absolutely.
you're going to save a ton of money by doing these things yourself. Uh, and they're really simple. They're not scary or over the top. You're not going to break your neck. I mean, this thing was a joke. If I could do it, it was kind of a joke, a challenge, and then has turned into something. So this is like just a 2x4.
Mhm.
It's shaved super thin, um, and the truss rod isn't going to blow out the back of it. And I mean, you're just to break these welds, I guess.
That would take some work, yeah.
Yeah, then what you're gonna see something on there goes, oh, that's not right, or you're gonna feel. I mean, if you're just cranking on and it's not moving, these are easy to see. You can see them um, right in the guitar, right here.
Mhm. Yep.
You know,
Right
they're
between the
easy,
neck and that first pickup. Mhm.
huh?
Right between the neck and that first pickup, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a little cutout for the fretboard that they sit in, and it's versus down in up at the headstock where you're always down here like, trying to look in there. You're trying to find it and you're messing your strings up because the tension's really great up here. Or you can't really detune it and then mess with the truss rod. I mean, you can then tune it all up, but I just do it in real time. A
And
little
again,
bit.
getting a feel for how much of an adjustment to make, whether it's a quarter turn or whether it's a half a turn, things like that.
Yeah. And you can take a Sharpie and just make a little mark on the wheel and on the um, fretboard or just for guide, just to make sure um, if
That
you
it's
were
lining
just
up. Mhm.
you can get a gauge of where you start. You can do the same thing um, for down here also. You can just stick a little Sharpie or something in there, fine point and get. I mean, that's good practice to do also. Um,
Would you set it up
but yeah,
differently for different size strings, or do you mostly use the same string type or same string diameter for most of your setups?
um, generally I go 54s to, and I like the 10s, 10 and 13.
Mhm.
And then for my G string, I go a 22 or 24 wound,
Mhm.
like the plain. Um, since I started doing that, it's just uh, I'll never go back to a plain.
The G
At
string
the
stays in tune better this way, right?
Yeah, yeah, it gives a little bit different of a tone and a feel.
Mhm.
I play a lot of I do drop tunings the majority of the time, and I do a lot of the uh, get this pinky down there on the G string.
Mhm.
So it feels like the rest of the wound strings that my fingers are on.
Mhm.
It just for me, it's a kind of something I can. It's a guide or a gauge. I know where my hands are at, the placement. Um, if I had the plain string, I might be thinking I'm on the B or something.
Kind of a landmark because it is still a thin string, but it's wound, so you can feel it
Yeah,
still and tell the difference between that and the B. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And yeah, that's kind of with us guitar players. We get stuck staring at the fretboard, or not so much back here. I mean, um, unless I'm trying to finger pick, and then I'm just
Yeah, I tend to stare at my fretting hand also when I'm playing bass. I tend to find myself really focused in there. So I've been trying to actively stop doing that or do it less because it's not that entertaining for the crowd if I'm just staring at my hand all the
yeah,
time.
yeah, and that's why I guess I've been adopting fretboards with no markers
Mhm.
or just the one on the 12.
Get
Uh,
comfortable with the feel and where you are. Yeah.
Yeah, it does something to the. I mean, you got your. And this one doesn't have any markers on the fretboard um, until about, I don't know, 45 minutes ago, and then I was kind of breaking down and putting some dots on it because with the wood burner, just because I just was kind of messing up a little too much, and it's something that I need to keep implementing. I made them really small, so they're not large, and they're not the ones that glow in the dark. So
Right, right.
they're still challenging. Make it
And there's
too
no
easy.
rule against having them either. So it's not like, oh, you
No,
cheated, you put dots on your guitar.
yeah,
None of that
no,
kind of thing.
no, that's just personally trying to
More
challenge
of a
my brain.
style choice. Yeah.
Yeah, trying to challenge the brain.
Mhm.
That's really what since I started back up doing music theory. I remember the very first day I grabbed my acoustic and sat down, put on the YouTube videos, starting at the beginning. Chromatic scale, um, 12 pitches, and yada yada yada. And I think it was maybe 10 or 15 minutes into it. I was just like,
Yeah. It can be painful. Those early lessons can be quite painful,
I was like,
especially if you have a good feel for it and you still want to go through it. It's like, I want to do the lessons that I don't miss anything, but this seems like it's so easy or so basic or whatever. Yeah.
I come back the next day, probably remembered 20%.
Hmm.
That 20% was enough that I was like, I didn't think I remember any of it. So
Hmm.
20%, I was like, that's a win. I'll take that. I got this.
Yeah.
And like just every day, we just kept going and kept going, and you remember more and more and more. And
And that's one of the big things is the everyday part. Just because in a lot of cases, like when I was first starting to play stringed instruments, my hands would get worn out. Like I couldn't play more than say 15, 20 minutes at a time. And then my fingers were either starting to hurt or, whatever. I wasn't able to hold the notes as cleanly as I was, trying to. So it's like I had to build it up over time. So those chromatic exercises were perfect for that, to try to build up strength over time.
yeah, you touch your
Yep.
exercise. That's
Get
awesome.
that finger independence going. Yep.
Yeah, it's all muscle memory. I don't know if anybody lifts weights out there, but it's the same thing. Yeah, grit your teeth and go for it. I literally, I'm not exaggerating, embellishing, or lying. 10 to 12 hours a day
Wow.
um, playing. It was, that's all I was doing.
Hmm.
Um,
That's one of those things where for me, like doing little exercises like that, if I'm sitting, just watching a movie or I'm sitting watching a video or I'm sitting talking to somebody on the phone, I can sit there and run through some exercises like that just to keep my fingers,
yeah,
limber and keep them ready
and
for the cane stuff.
you can combine, you just do different patterns.
Hmm.
So you can kind of like pentatonic pattern, um, your A minor, or I
Hmm.
think it's A, your, where your, that too many? You can kind of just get into those patterns and get your fingers used to that kind
Hmm.
of, because as guitar players we see everything as shapes and patterns. And
Exactly. That's the other thing is not to get locked into one. People a lot of times like to talk about the five pentatonic boxes, and it's easy to get locked into a box. Like if you say, okay, I'm in pentatonic box one, and you get into a mindset like that, and you just start going up and down that pentatonic box, and then okay, now I'm going to shift to pentatonic box two. It's like you don't want to be kind of locked in that way. It's more like you want to know the boxes, you want to know where you are, but you also want to be able to freely move from one to the next to the next to the next, or at least understand where you are so that you could move laterally, up 7 frets or whatever, and then work that pentatonic box back down. Like those are the kinds of things that to me, those kinds of connections, the connections between the lateral scales going up the strings and the scales going across the strings, those are ones that they're really good to try to get locked together in your head, because then whether you want to navigate that way or that way, you can go higher, by going up strings or by going up the fretboard. You got different ways of accomplishing the same thing, and there'll be different times you'd want to do each of those things based on what you're trying to accomplish.
yeah, a lot of people get just into this vertical
Hmm.
box
Yeah.
shape up, and your solos or your playing just becomes robotic
And you could hear
almost.
it. You could hear it. Like that's
Yeah,
the kind of thing that you hear somebody playing that way, and I don't even have to look. It's like, okay, that's just one box, and it's not that it's bad. It's not that it's wrong. It's just one of those things that after you've heard it enough times and you've done it yourself enough times, and you're like, I want to move out of that box. I want to move past that. I want to just freely make music and not focus on, okay, now I am in this position. Now I am on that scale. Now I am over here. I just want to let go of all that. It's important to learn all that, understand it, internalize it, and then kind of forget about it and just allow yourself to play without having to think about all that stuff every time.
Yeah, there's a fine line of separating the book work and theory and the thinking, and then playing.
Right.
If you're thinking, you're not playing. Um, and for me, really the biggest thing that helped me start or to start and to see the fretboard differently, because I remember back in the day, um, sorry, Chris, if you're watching, that, who's my old bass player. Um, I get up to like 7, 9, and that was 7 was like, okay, okay, easy, easy.
Yep,
Nine's like, stop.
yep. Too high,
So,
too high.
yeah, it didn't, I would get lost, I didn't realize or know that it would repeat at 12 or whatever. It was just uncharted territory. And what really helped me was the um, chromatic scale, the whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Because
Sure.
then when I started playing, I'm like, okay, I did 3 whole steps. I know a half step's coming. And then I know after that, it's going to be 2 whole steps, and then a half step. And then it's going to repeat. And then you kind of start combining that with strings. And, um, that was one of the biggest things that got me from 1 to 22 or,
Yep.
or 24 based on the guitar.
And people do
And then,
talk about the importance of learning all the notes on the fretboard, and to me that is important. But at the same time, I don't like if somebody says B flat, I can find one, but I don't need to know right immediately. Okay, that eighth fret over there is the B flat.
give me a few minutes. I'll get back. Let me find.
Exactly. And if you're
the
playing
the
live, that's no good.
right. The octaves are another one. That just that practice of playing the octaves in the shapes, you can chase those all the way up.
Yep.
And that's really the chromatic scale and the octaves. One of the easiest thing for beginner to kind of grasp those concepts, and then be able to get from one end of the fretboard all the way to the next. It's once you tackle that feat, because I'm getting up to here, that does something. You're like, yeah, all right, it's you know
Yeah.
you're stuck between 1 and 5, and you're always wondering, well, I wonder what's up there, but I don't know.
Yep. And when you start working up there, you start realizing how close together those frets are, and it actually makes a lot of the things that you might be trying to play even easier. Like if you're trying to play them down in the 1 to 5th fret, they might be really far away, and you're stretching to make that work. But then you slide it up an octave, and it's so much easier all of a sudden.
And get the 2 whole steps there, and yeah, it's
Yep.
a little challenging.
But if that was 12, 14, and 16, it's like, oh,
Yeah,
not so bad.
that's why where the intonation comes into is when you start um, down here is fine, but anything really past 5, it really starts to show itself.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Something came to me last night, because we had talked about the little wordplay that I help, or what helps me remember is word association things and what I kind of came up with. But like, I don't know, new players, Eddie 8 Dynamite, good by Eddie for your strings. Eddie 8 Dynamite by Eddie.
Yep.
That we're saying sharp back, or sharpshooter, move back far distance. Like sharpshooters can shoot from far distance, move back, fall flat on your face, flat front, fall on your face.
Mm-hmm.
Your tuner pegs, it's the same direction. Um, if your pitch is sharp, right, you're going to tune down.
Mm-hmm.
So you're turning your tuner to the right, or you're moving it back, and you're
Loosening it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
loosening the string, which that's what kind of threw me off about the intonation is you go, okay, well, if it's sharp, you want to loosen the string and get more string in there. So you move it back, and that moving it back, you're thinking that's going to make it longer.
Exactly. I'm not thinking loosening, I'm thinking lengthening. Yeah, making the string longer at that point. Mm-hmm.
So that kind of, for me, it was a little challenging to get my head around. So, but yeah, the tuner thing just kind of just hit me last night. Well, it's the same principle, and the direction's the same. If your note is flat, then you got to tune it up. So you tune to the left, which is the same direction as the saddle. If you're flat, you move it to the left. You're you're shortening the string, which is going to raise the pitch.
Now, when we're using the tuning, the tuners up there, that's where we're actually tightening and loosening, but leaving the same length because the nut and
Yeah,
saddle are still
so
where they are. So
it's just an association of which way
right,
you're tuning. You're not actually.
exactly.
Don't get yeah. I don't mean to confuse anybody by saying using the tuner to tune. I'm just adopting the principle of when you tune a string
Mhm.
flat. If it's flat or sharp in pitch, and you're trying to get it, right there. You're going to be, which way are you turning it? And it's the same direction as your saddle, which
Mhm.
I never made a connection. It just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks last night. Like,
Nice.
the same right or left that you would use down here.
And
And
to me, it's actually the listening. Like
What
whenever
what do,
I'm
what
tuning,
do you
I'm always
use for
playing a
your
note.
tuner?
In this case, we use
um,
the tuners that are on it, not an
well,
actual tuner. But
if I had the option, I would take a hammer and smash this little thing. But
the snark.
yeah, I do not like it.
Mhm.
It seems like it's a little bit off. Um, I like to use the tuner that's on my Neural DSP plugin.
Right. I like
And
the ones
I'm
on the computers as well. Like I use the one whether it's in BandLab or in Cakewalk or wherever. Like usually I'll use one of those tuners before I'll use the clip-on. The clip-on is more like I am somewhere I don't have access to a machine or whatever. I use that, and then in a pinch you'll go by ear. But in the main, if you have the option, going by a digital tuner is best.
yeah, because it's
Well,
almost
would you say one has a advantage? One's more accurate, faster to use?
uh, the
Not
digital.
necessarily more accurate, but
Is it? I've seen them. That's one like the chromatic tuner.
it kind of comes down to how it looks on the face too. Like if you see that it's got like the big wedges, like it's showing, okay, you're flat by this much, and you start bringing it back, and then okay, the wedge is now green and it's dead center, and if it's too sharp, it's going this way, that kind of thing. It's using a needle for that. The needle isn't always that responsive. Sometimes the LCD on the actual snark like isn't as precise as it could be, but that's why I like the ones that are on the computer because again, those seem to be more responsive and more solid. But either way, once you're in tune regardless of what tuner you're looking at. As long as it's a 440 tuner here and a 440 tuner there, it should be exactly the same. It's not like
Yeah,
one should be
I
better than the other, but
the one that you know um, wherever it has the little ball right in the center, and you can just line it right up, and it really gets it. I I noticed with this one that I almost have to tune the G string to where it's flat a
few
few
cents
bars,
there, yeah.
or else I have to tune it and then strum and then
So
adjust it.
you purposely compensate?
Yeah, because I know it's
Yeah.
just another trick. I don't know if people or a lot of guitar players know, but I didn't know, is turn your selector switch to the neck pickup and turn your tone knob, turn it all the way off, and it'll get a
While you're tuning?
mhm, and it'll stop it from the ball or whatever from bouncing. It'll give you a more accurate uh, reading.
Nice. For me, part of it with the clip-ons there is that it's reading it from the vibrations in the wood, so it's like it's pulling everything from in there together, and they're usually pretty accurate in terms of as long as it's clipped onto a good spot and as long as it's got good contact and all that, it usually works fine for those types of things. Being in tune though is very important across the band, and that's where sometimes it's not always about the tuner because you could tune perfectly and there's a keyboard player in your band and the keyboard player, their keyboard just happens to be 4 cents short or 4 cents flat or what have you, and so you could be perfectly in tune but you guys sound terrible together because you need to tune to him or he needs to tune to you. It depends which is easier. If it's an actual
Yeah,
physical
everybody
piano,
used to tune to me.
yeah. Yep. And that's where it's usually the piano or some other, like if it's a physical, like a grand piano, for example, you're not going to sit there and retune a piano at a rehearsal, but you're going to come in and say, okay, here's the A on this piano. And then everybody with their instrument matches that A and then tunes to that relatively so that they all sound good
Yeah, or
together.
if you have like brass, if you got a sax player, you guys are going to need to tune to the sax player.
Yep. And that's where it's not always about the tuner itself. It's more about making sure that everybody is tuned together, whatever method makes that most easy. Really
Yeah, not all instruments can tune.
Yeah.
You really can't tune a sax.
Yeah. Whereas with a keyboard, a lot of times, if it's a more recent keyboard, you've got you can transpose, and you also have a fine tuning function where you can go by cents, or fractions of a cent. You can start tuning up, 3 cents sharp or 4 cents flat or whatever if you need to match a a certain thing you're looking for.
Doesn't sound like much, but those few cents make a big deal.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the things that the closer it is, it's almost the worse it is. Like you get that wah wah,
Yeah.
where if it's a little further off, it's a wah 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 wah, and it's much more noticeable.
I,
But when it is,
I
you know,
kind of use
that
that
slow
wobble,
warble.
a good gauge. You know, if you're tuning by ear, you can just kind of hear that wobble and
Yep.
dial it in where it gets a solid.
Yep. And same is true for when you're tuning basses and guitars and all that. Same tricks, same ideas. Most effective.
Yeah, that string hertz is what? That's 1 second.
Hertz
Uh,
is cycles per second. Yep.
yeah,
So
and
like
it
60 hertz, 60 cycles in a second. Yep.
yeah 440. That's 440 rotations in a second.
Yep.
String.
That sucker is vibrating.
It, and it goes north and south also. So to have your um, nut and saddle with, you know, the resistance where it would catch on or where it would catch, that's what's going to cause a lot of the detuning issues is it's getting hung up. Um, there's a certain way to file your nut slots. Uh,
I've heard
which,
people also put graphite in there or like pencil lead. They'll just, you know, take a pencil and just kind of scribble in that little slot to make it so that the string will slide across easily. It can still get bound up though if it's too tight.
oh, that's extreme close up.
The graphite powder. Yep. Somebody took a whole lot of pencils and scribbled a whole lot of stuff and put it all in a jar.
Don't breathe this in. It's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So these nut files here, it's, you know what, I just recommend to everybody, get a guitar, get one of these kits off of Amazon. They're about $20, maybe $30. I'm not sure if guitar stores sell them,
So
but
like
they have.
that's like the Swiss Army knife of
The Luthier's toolkits.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you get these little files that are okay. Stop. I don't know if you can see the little ridges on there that you know, different sizes for different gauges of string. Kind of
Nice.
blurry. But yeah, when you file your slot, you want to the same angle that the strings are breaking at over the saddle. You want to file that in the same angle. You don't want to go straight flat across because what you're wanting is this string right here just to touch the front edge of that nut and not the whole nut itself. You want it to, you know, get this taper down here. And then I kind of go out to the sides, you know, when I get down kind of a little bit that way, especially if you have like a 3x3 instead of 6 in a line.
Mm-hmm.
If, you know, like Gibson's or whatever, you got that break of that string, it can get caught up on that back end of the nut. So to kind of just take a little bit of material off on the backside, it will help the string not get caught up or bound or anything, more free moving. But really, the angle is super important.
And even
So
before a string would break in those situations, sometimes you can even just hear it. Like when you're tuning, if you tune down or you tune up, and you hear that the string, instead of just moving like it normally would, you can hear it like move in a sudden jump. Like you hear like a clang, like a weird sound. That usually means that it's getting caught up in there somehow. And so that would be a situation where you would either want to file down or lubricate with the graphite powder, for example, to try to alleviate that.
I like, you know, whether if I'm not using the graphite powder, I use just the fretboard cleaners. They have the spray and then
Right.
the oil or whatever. I
Like
just
Finger Ease was one of those. I don't know if that specifically as a fretboard cleaner. That one was more for a string lubrication, but same idea.
yeah, and they actually have a product, nut lube.
Mm-hmm.
They
They would have to call it something like that, wouldn't they?
had to. Yeah, it was an absolute.
Hey, I'm cool with that name.
Next time you walk into a guitar store, just walk in and say, "Excuse me, miss, I need," and see if you can say it with a straight face. I dare.
Everybody holds it.
Not gonna be able to.
Now, for those files though, was that for a specific gauge of strings, or does that cover the whole
It,
gamut there?
it covers the whole gambit of them. It's got, you know, the thick one for the thickest one's what I use, of course, because I use like 54 or 56.
Mhm.
And then it goes all the way down to the finest, which even on they even got ridges all the way down on these little ones too. So yeah, it covers the whole gambit. But really, I mean, for me, I still use a little bit wider one down on the low end too. I don't use the exact one that's designed for it, but that's just me. I'm not.
Mhm. You
It's
got to go with what works. But going
there's
back to what
not
you
a
were
right
saying,
or yeah, there's not a right or wrong, honestly, except for some of the basics, truss rod, the tuning. You know, there's things that you have to follow in that sense. But as far as how wide your gap is, or your nut slot, or your action, or all those other things, what kind of wood you use, or the tone, or people want to use bridge pickups in the neck spot, and uh, there's certain reasons why the neck pickup is made the way it is, but there's no right or wrong on that.
yeah. And the big
Music is,
thing comes back to what you were saying before: get comfortable with your tools, whether it's the tools to work on the guitar or whether it's the guitar itself as your tool. Like, get comfortable with your tools. Like, get familiar with it. Try different things with it. Do all the,
yeah,
you know,
don't,
getting into the maintenance is definitely a lot of fun. I'll agree there. Like, I've started to do all my own setups and all of my own most everything. I haven't done any like fret redressing or I haven't worked too much with the truss rod because it hasn't really needed it, but at the same time, it's like I understand how and when. So that's the important thing. Is if somebody brings a guitar to me and says, "Oh, this plays like crap," I can take it and I can look over 3, 4, 5 things real quick and get it dialed in pretty fast.
yeah, and that's one of the things that we kind of touched on last night that I really admired, about you and what you said is you seen the fellas saddles
Hmm.
straight across, and
It's a
I
dead
was like,
giveaway.
"Okay,
Yeah.
we know what to talk about here." And so that identification, um, all these things are really important and helpful for a guitar player's growth. Um, because the more comfortable and confident you are with um, your instrument, even down to the way it sets in your lap. And for me, even because I tend to lean forward when I play, and so having this horn up here, kind of higher up on my chest, versus um, my Iceman that I play, they don't have, they
Right. Right.
kind
Kind
of
of
a
a different
low,
shape up there. Hmm.
yeah, and so almost kind of feel like I'm falling over the edge when I'm playing it. But
And that's where also things like with a Gibson, like with the SG that I play, the headstock, it's like a little bit of a headstock dive. So if I'm playing, like it feels like it wants to, not fall, but it feels like the headstock wants to go down. So you're constantly, pulling it back up. And
yeah,
some instruments balance that way, but
that sounds like what you're talking about when you're standing up with the
yeah.
strap.
Yep.
Because when I'm playing my Les Paul in my lap,
Hmm.
it wants to just fall backwards.
Exactly. Yep.
It doesn't have you know, just the the balance for sitting in my lap. So this offset body of the Telemaster, the Fender just come out with this year. I think it's come from their custom shop.
Hmm.
Um, I really like it because it's comfortable.
Hmm.
Um, and that's the thing about building them is you can set them in your line and be like, you know what, I think I could change this up a little bit. I could shave off or file a little bit more here so it'll sit over my leg, or I don't like the way it feels right here. I can just You can do whatever, and you can just,
Customize, like truly customize. Yeah.
yeah. So that brings a whole another level to the instrument, that now you're making it 100% for your style of playing yourself, because you buy a guitar off the shelf, and when you're whatever you're playing at
You
advanced
get what
music,
you get.
You're playing with
yeah.
it, sure.
And if you don't know how to do those things, you're going to have this guitar, and you're going to have this thought in the back here, like, I love this guitar, I love the way it sounds, but I would, if I could find one that has this or feels this way, or you're always going to have something that you'd want to do different, or you wish felt different or something. And so when you start to do builds or learn about it, that's when the possibility for that opens up.
Hmm.
And at this point, for me, the sky's the limit. It's all my
Yeah.
creativity, my cap. That's my ceiling. As far as I keep an open mind, and I create whatever. I mean, anything I think of, I can do. Um,
The other thing
I
would be to
Well, and clearly because you build guitars, got a greater appreciation for the maintenance, the adjusting. You really get to appreciate why a guitar sounds the way it does
Yeah,
with that knowledge.
because I had no idea, and I want I don't know how many is watching or how many's going to see this, but I hope everybody does, because
Well, as you said, like every guitarist benefits from this kind of
I want
knowledge.
everybody to know that I'm not some special human being. I started doing this in May of last year, and I started doing builds in August, and those were build kits. I built this one, I'll go 2 months ago. It was probably less than that. And I've learned everything from YouTube and having the question in my head and then going to Google and doing a search. And I always ask why, and then I got to figure it out,
Yeah.
And one
And
thing about knowing what you really want from a guitar, like when customizing a guitar, the first couple times I went in to get a setup, they're like, "Well, how do you play? How do you want the setup?" And I'm like, "I have no idea." At the time, I don't know. Like, like you tell me, I really don't know. But at the time, I mean, I am 6'6", so for me, I'm a big guy. So they're like, "Okay, you probably hit a little bit harder, so I'm going to set it up like this." And so like we talked it over a little bit, set it up that way, and went with that. But not knowing what I wanted was one of those things where to me it was important to go to the guitar store and just go to the guitar store and pick up this kind of guitar, that kind of guitar, this kind of guitar. Just try all these different, like you said, body styles, shapes, see, and just get a feel. Does this one feel headstock heavy or body heavy? Does it fit right? Go through all of them and check them all out. One thing I wanted to mention is that we're going to take a break to go with You Dad Me at Hello. Those guys are going to be starting in a minute here, and that we're going to come back around
Yep,
10:30.
they're just about ready.
All right, they're just about ready. So we're going to break that now. But we definitely appreciate all the time and the insight you have, Donnie, there. The good stuff there for the setups, and we'll come back to some of that stuff later if you want, and we'll look at other things.
Oh yeah, want to do a lot more guitar talk.
We'll see about hearing your guitar too.
thanks, guys.
All right, our pleasure, man.
Yeah, thanks for the info, Donnie.
We'll grab Angie and get the dads going, and then
This has been an episode of Talking Shh. Shh. I said Shh. IT with Glenn and Tony. We're gonna